Dear students, I am Abdul Rahman, Assistant Professor of English, Government First Grade College, Chennagiri. I am discussing here in this session the Victorian Literature Part 1, BA, Optional English, Semester 5, Davangere University, Davangere. This is the 11th session, whereas I am discussing in this session about the detailed study of the Victorian poets, particularly the great poets of the Victorian literature, Alfred Lord Tennyson, then Robert Browning, then Matthew Arnold, then Gerard Manley Hopkins, and you have many multiple choice questions on these. Now, let us have to think about the learning objectives of this session, that our students make understand and familiar with the Victorian poets. The learning outcomes that our students will analyze the works of Victorian poets, and the students will also be able to understand the use of literary devices like metaphor, puns, paradoxes in the spiritual and religious poems of the metaphysical age. Whereas in the recap that we have already discussed the themes of the Victorian literature like realism, humanism, socialism, criticism, naturalism, glory of the past, modernism, the philosophical ideas, and the intellectualism were all discussed in the last session. Now, let us try to understand the depth of the life of Alfred Lord Tennyson here. As far Alfred Lord Tennyson is concerned, who was born on August 6, 1809 at Somersby, Lincolnshire. He was fourth of 12 children of George and Elizabeth Tennyson. The poet's grandfather had violated tradition by making his younger son Charles his heir and arranging for the poet's father to enter the ministry. The contrast of his own family relatives straightened circumstances to the great wealth of his aunt Elizabeth Russell and impoverished and led him to worry about money all his life. He also had a lifelong fear of mental illness, for several men of his family had a mild form of epilepsy, which was then thought a shameful disease. His father and brother Arthur made their cases worse by his excessive drinking. His brother Edward had to be in a mental institution after 1833, and he himself spent a few weeks under doctor's care in 1843. The success of his 1842 poems made Tennyson a popular poet, and in 1845 he received a civil list, that is government job and government pension of $200 a year, which helped relieve his financial difficulties. The success of the Princess and in memoriam and his appointment in 1850 as a laureate finally established him as the most popular poet of the Victorian era. Long lived, like most of his family, Alfred Lord Tennyson died on October 6, 1892 at the age of 83. Now, Now, let us learn about Robert Browning. Robert Browning was born on the 7th May 1812 in Camberwell, London, England. He was the brilliant son of Sarah Anna, daughter of German ship owner. His father, Robert Browning, was a clerk in the Bank of England. Robert was highly influenced by his mother's love for music and his father's scholarly interests. His father owned a huge library with 600 volumes of different languages. At 14, he had learnt Latin, Greek, Italian, and French, and learnt drawing, music, and dancing by several tutors for 2 years. He was taught at home during his early years. He was influenced by P.B. Shelley and Charles Darwin. He stated he stated to write poetry at the age of 12. Robert entered University College, London University, to study Greek at 16, but left after a year. He owned a honorary doctorate of civil law from Oxford University in 1887. Robert Browning married Elizabeth Barrett in 1846. He was a major English poet of the Victorian age, noted for his mastery of dramatic monologue and psychological portrait. Robert Browning began to write verses at the age of 6. His first published work was Pauline, a fragment of a confession issued anonymously in 1833, and Paracelsus in 1835, whose hero was a Renaissance alchemist. It received favorable reviews and brought about important friendship with the authors William Wordsworth and Thomas Carlyle, and with the actor William C. Macready. He died on December 12, 1889, at the age of 77 in Venice, Italy, and he is buried in the Poets' Corner in Westminster's Abbey. Matthew Arnold. As for Matthew Arnold's life, he was born in Laleham, Middlesex on December 24, 1822. He began his career as a poet, winning early recognition as a student at the Rugby School, where his father, Thomas Arnold, was a strict and an innovative headmaster. In 1844, completing his undergraduate degree at Balliol College, Oxford University, he returned to Rugby as a teacher of classics. After marrying in 1851, Matthew Arnold began to work as a government school inspector and traveled throughout England and the continent. Throughout his 35 years, Arnold developed an interest in education, critical works, and his poetry. Empedocles on Enta, published in 1852, and poems of 1853 established Arnold's reputation as a poet, and in 1857 he was offered a position as a professor of poetry at Oxford University until 1867. Matthew Arnold became the first professor to lecture in English rather than Latin. During his time, Arnold wrote the bulk of his most famous critical works, essays in criticism, published in 1865, and Culture and Anarchy, published in 1869, in which he sets forth ideas that greatly reflect the predominant values of the Victorian era. Matthew Arnold died in Liverpool on April 15, 1888. The major works of Matthew Arnold's are Dover's Beach, The Scholar Gypsy, Theresis, Culture and Anarchy, Literature and Dogma, and the major themes included in his poetry is anti-modernization, nature, love, time, classical mythology, labor, etc. So the next is Gerald Manley Hopkins' life. Gerald Manley Hopkins was born in Stratford, Essex, now in Greater London, as the eldest of probably 9 children to Manley and Catherine Hopkins. Gerard Manley Hopkins was born on 28th July 1844 and died on 8th of June 1889. Was an English poet and Jesuit priest whose posthumous fame established him among the leading Victorian poets. He was christened at the Anglican Church of St. John's, Stratford. His father founded a marine insurance firm and at one time served as Hawaiian Consul General in London. He was also for a time churchwarden at St. John at Stampstead. His grandfather was the physician John Simon Smith, a university colleague of John Keats and close friend of the eccentric philanthropist Anne Thawards. As a poet, Hopkins' father published works including the Philosopher's Stone and other poems published in 1843. Paitas Metrica, published in 1849, and Spice Legium Poeticum, a gathering of verses by Manley Hopkins, published in 1892. He reviewed poetry for the Times and wrote one novel. Hopkins' initiated ambitions was to be a painter. He would continue to sketch throughout his life and was inspired as an adult by the work of John Ruskin and the Pre-Raphaelites. He died on 8th June 1889. Gerald Manley Hopkins' major works included Dinsey Poplars, Pied Beauty, The Wind Hover, To Christ our Lord, The Wreck of the Dutch Land. You know, then we have other important poets of that period is E.B. Browning, that is Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and other major poets. We have now 5 multiple choice questions on the discussion. You can answer all these easily, and you have also assignments given for you, where the comment on the characteristics of Alfred Lord Tennyson's poetry, you have comment on the narrative techniques of Robert Browning, you have Matthew Arnold's attacks on the contemporary tastes and manners of the barbarians. You can discuss here, and for further reference you can refer the textbook which is prescribed for the 5th semester students, published by the Orient Blocks One company, and also you can collect more information from this web link, given web link. Thank you for watching me. Thank you one and all.